Hi guys, tonight's story. Welcome to the mines. You're already miserable. So, you've woken up in medieval Europe. But not as a knight, not as a noble, not even as a wandering lute player with strong opinions about cheese. No, you're a miner. And not the cool kind with a helmet light and a modern elevator. You're the old kind, the really old kind. The kind who wakes up before sunrise, coughs a little, puts on stiff boots, grabs a pickaxe, and heads into a deep, cold, echoing hole in the ground. And that's your day, every day. Until something collapses. Or you do. Let's take a nice, sleepy walk through the worst career choice in the Middle Ages. Step 1. Congratulations. Your porno body chooses mining because they want to. You end up in the mine because you were born into a family that already does it, or because you've got debts, or because there are no career fairs, no internships, just someone handing you a tool and pointing at a hole. Go in, don't die. Hopefully, you're not paid much, sometimes not at all, if you're working for a local lord. But hey, at least you get some moldy bread, and the thrill of not knowing whether today is your last. The mine, a hole with a personality, and none of it is friendly. It's dark. Darker than anything you've ever experienced. No windows, no skylights, no fancy medieval glow sticks, just a flickering candle, maybe, stuck into a lump of clay or wedged in a rock crevice. It smells like wet stone, old smoke, and that one guy who never bathes, which, to be fair, is most people. Including the air is thick, it's hard to breathe. There are no fans, no vents, just a faint breeze from somewhere far above. If you're lucky, someone's operating a bellows up top, trying to push air down, a pipe. If not, good luck, lungs. Every sound echoes weirdly. A cough, a pickaxe hit, someone muttering a prayer to St. Barbara, the patron saint of miners, and please don't let this ceiling fall. Your daily schedule, in case you're taking notes. Wake up at dawn. Or earlier. Eat something grey and suspicious, maybe porridge, maybe leftover soup. Walk to the mine, enter the tunnel. Get assigned a spot. Start digging. 4 hours. Lunch. Bread, maybe. If you're lucky, a tiny onion, no break room. Just a slightly wider part of the tunnel where you won't be crushed as fast if something collapses. Back to digging, or hauling rocks, or carting water, or shoveling out loose dirt that looks way too close to collapsing. You leave at dusk, covered in grime, muscles aching, nose full of dust. You dream of rocks, you dream of falling, you dream of not mining. Then you wake up and do it again. Why are we even down here? Usually, metal, silver, iron, lead, copper, sometimes salt, very valuable, very sweaty work. Occasionally, gold, but not for you, of course. That goes straight to the nobles. You might get to touch it once, though, before they yell at you to keep working. Whatever you're digging for, it's going to someone richer than you. You're just a tool, the very tired, very expendable tool. The first day always hurts the most. Your hands blister. Your back aches in places you didn't know existed. Your knees feel like they've aged 30 years. The pickaxe is heavier than it looks. The tunnel is narrower than you expected. You keep bumping your head. You try to look cool like the older miners, but they're not cool. They're just quiet. Because they're tired, or traumatized, or both. One of them says, "You'll get used to it." You won't, but you'll pretend. Because what else are you going to do? The local priest says it's honest work, and it is. You're providing metal that becomes swords, tools, coins, or stained glass window frames in churches. You're not allowed inside, but it doesn't feel holy. Not when you're ankle deep in muck, coughing up black dust, praying the ceiling holds for one more shift. Still, the priest blesses the mine entrance once a year. He waves incense. Everyone claps. A few people sneeze. Then it's back to work. Night comes. But rest doesn't. You go home to a one-room cottage. The roof leaks. The floor creaks. There's a weird smell, and it might be coming from you. Dinner is reheated mush. Maybe cheese, maybe not cheese. You don't ask. You sit on a stool. You stare at the fire. You don't speak much. Your family is just as tired. You go to sleep thinking about rocks. You dream about tunnels. You wake up, and it's still dark. And not just because it's early. And yet, somehow, you keep going. Maybe it's for your kids. Maybe it's because the mine owner promised a bonus he won't give it. Maybe it's just because that's what you do. Day after day, pick after pick. Dust, sweat, and superstition. You're a medieval miner. It sucks, but you're not alone. There's a whole crew of half-broken men and women doing the same thing. And sometimes you even laugh. Just a little. Just enough. Dig. Pray. Don't die. Daily life in a medieval mine. All right. You're back. The sun hasn't even risen yet, but your day has started. Again. Because, as a medieval miner, your schedule is simple. Wake up. Walk to the mine. And try not to die. Underground. Let's follow your average day. Spoiler. It's not a spa day. Not even close. Morning. Not so bright. Not so early. Your eyes open. You immediately regret it. You slept on straw that pokes your back and smells like damp socks. Your bones ache. Not in a poetic way, just real pain. Every joint has its own complaint. Your spine mutters rude things under its breath. You throw on the same clothes you wore yesterday and the day before. Thick wool tunic, rough hose, stiff leather boots that haven't been dry since ever. Breakfast, grey porridge, thin beer, or maybe some dark bread that's more crust than crumb. No fruit, no coffee, no peace. Then it's off to the mine. The walk of no joy. You and a few others trudge along the same muddy path to the mine. No one talks much. It's too early. You save your breath for what's coming. The mine entrance looms like the mouth of something that's definitely thinking about eating you. There's a small shrine nearby, maybe to St. Barbara or St. Anne, or anyone who seems like they might prevent the roof from falling in. You whisper a quick prayer. Doesn't matter if you're religious. It's habit, superstition, hope. Then down you go. Down, down. Down's descent is steep and slippery. You use a rope or a creaky ladder to lower yourself into the mine shaft. No handrails, no harness, no OSHA. The deeper you go, the more the world changes. The air grows thick. The light fades. The smells shift from fresh soil to something sharper, smoky, metallic, damp. And then, suddenly, you're in it, the mine. A low tunnel just tall enough to crouch in, just wide enough to scrape your shoulders. It's muddy, cramped, echoey. You feel like you're inside the throat of the earth. You light your tiny tallow candle. It flickers pathetically, better than nothing. Barely. Your job. Break rocks until you can eat. You've been assigned to a tunnel. Today, some section of the mine that may or may not produce anything useful. But that's not your concern. Your job is simple. Swing your pickaxe at the wall. Break it. Haul it. Repeat. You hit the rock. Again. And again. And again. Each swing makes your arms tremble. Dust fills the air. Your eyes sting. The pickaxe handle rubs your palms raw. Your back has begun writing hate letters to your brain. Sometimes, you strike something soft, clay or crumbly earth, and it feels like a miracle. Other times, it's solid quartz, and your pick just bounces off. Feels personal. Lunch, if you can call it that, after hours of digging, a bell rings. Or maybe someone just yells eat, loud enough. That's your break. You gather with the others in a slightly less terrible section of tunnel. Maybe there's a wooden bench, maybe just a rock. Probably a rock. Lunch is cold bread. Maybe a boiled turnip, a flask of water, or weak beer. You chew slowly, staring at the tunnel wall like it's judging you. It is. There's a joke. Someone tells a story. Someone else coughs in a way that doesn't sound good. No one says anything about it. Then it's back to digging. Other tasks that also suck. You're not always digging. Sometimes you're shoveling, loose or into a basket, pushing a wooden cart full of rubble down a track that barely works, hauling water out of the mine because it keeps flooding as if the mine is trying to drown you. Stacking wood for fire, setting a technique where you heat rock to crack it. And maybe smoke yourself out, ventilating the mine by operating giant bellows attached to a leather pipe. You thought this would be an easier job. It's not. Your arms hate you. Danger is just part of Ivory Creek. In the tunnel is a warning. Every gust of bad air makes you pause. Every shift in the ceiling might mean a collapse. You know the risks. You've seen things. You remember that one guy whose candle set off a pocket of gas. He made it out, barely. You all smelled like roast onions for a week. You remember the cart that broke its wheel and crushed a miner's foot. They tried to splint it with sticks and prayer. It didn't work. There's no first aid, no doctor. Just a bucket of water and a short, awkward funeral. Quitting time sort of. Eventually, someone calls the end of the shift, or maybe the sun sets, or maybe someone just faints, and that's the signal. You climb out. Slower than you went in. The fresh air hits your face like a blessing and a slap. You cough a lot. You're covered in black grime. Your clothes stick to your skin. You look like you lost a fight with a coal oven. You walk home silently. Because even talking feels like too much. You do it again tomorrow. Fears no weekend. No paid time off. No wellness retreat. If you don't work, you don't eat. And the mind doesn't care if you're tired. So you sleep early. You dream of stone walls and falling beams. Tools of the trade. Rock breaking for beginners. So, you've gone down into the mine. You've choked on dust. You've hauled dirt, cursed quietly, and made it out with all your limbs still attached. Congrats. But now let's slow it down a little. Let's take a gentle, relaxing look at the real stars of the show. The things that made all that rock breaking possible. Your tools, and spoiler, they're terrible. The pickaxe, your new best friend. Let's start with the classic. The pickaxe, not the sleek modern one with balance and design. No, this one's a crooked piece of iron stuck on a heavy wooden shaft that's been used, reused, and quietly cursed by a dozen other miners before you. It's too heavy. The grip is rough. The balance is bad. It's either too long to swing comfortably or too short to actually reach anything. But hey, it does the job. Eventually, after several dozen increasingly sad swings, you swing it into the tunnel wall. It bounces off, and you swear the wall just smirked at you, but you keep swinging. Because it's either that or starvation. The hammer and chisel combo for the more refined mining moments. You've got your hammer and chisel. The chisel is a narrow wedge of iron that you jam into cracks. The hammer is a hammer. Big, clunky, heavy. You hit one with the other until the rock gives up. It's a two-hand job. Or sometimes two-person. One holds the chisel. One swings the hammer, and everyone prays that nobody misses, because nothing ruins a long day like accidentally breaking your co-worker's hand or your own. Still, this is the method you use when you want precision, which is a strong word in medieval mining. Let's just say, a slightly less chaotic hole, fire setting, the fancy technique that wants to kill you. This one's a bit dramatic. When the rock is too tough for your sad little tools, you heat it with fire. You stack wood against the stone wall, light it, and let the flames bake the rock 4 hours. The heat causes the rock to expand and crack. Then, you throw water on it. The sudden cooling makes the rock shatter. Brilliant, right? Except the fire eats all the air and fills the tunnel with smoke, and sometimes sets the mine on fire. So yes, it works, but also yes, it is horrifying. Especially in a place where escape routes are just climb the burning rope and hope. Still, sometimes, it's the only way to move forward. So into the flames you go, buckets, baskets, and back payments. You've broken the rock loose. It's time to haul it out. Enter the medieval mining bucket. A sturdy wooden thing with a rope handle and enough splinters to start its own forest. You scoop up ore and carry it by hand, or if you're lucky, you toss it into a slightly less miserable ore cart, which is pushed on tiny wooden rails that squeak, shake, and occasionally collapse. None of this is gentle. None of it is fun. The carts are heavy, the rails are crooked, and the mine floor is a collection of pits, puddles, and ankle twisters. And when the cart breaks, congratulations, you're the cart now. Water tools, because flooding is a hobby. Mines fill with water constantly. Rain leaks in. Underground springs surprise you. Sometimes the mine just weeps from the walls. You need to keep it dry, or at least not ankle deep in muck. So you get buckets on ropes, a few hand-cranked pumps, and if your mine is really fancy, a water wheel-powered drainage system. Most of the time, though, it's just you, a bucket, and a long day of bailing. It's not glamorous, it's barely effective, but if you don't do it, you'll need a snorkel, ladders, ropes, and hope this doesn't snap. Let's talk transportation. As in, how you move up and down inside the mine. Ropes are used for lowering, tools, lifting ore, and occasionally dragging out an unconscious miner who inhaled too many fumes. They're made of twisted hemp or horsehair, strong dish, but they fray and rot and break when it's least convenient. Ladders are wooden. They're nailed together with iron spikes, often at a weird slant, and feel just sturdy enough to give you false confidence. You climb slowly, whispering prayers between every step. You've never known fear like stepping onto a damp ladder rung that creaks under your weight. Is it creaking or cracking? You never know. That's part of the fun. Just kidding. It's awful. Carrying it all. The miner's kit. You don't get a toolbox, or a locker, or a pegboard with hooks. You carry everything on you or in a sack. Pickaxe over your shoulder, chisel and hammer hanging from a belt, candle stuck into a lump of clay or a little tin holder, maybe a knife, maybe a flask, maybe a small amulet or lucky charm. Because you've seen what happens to people who don't carry one. They vanish or get buried. Or both. Your clothes carry the rest: dust, sweat, memories of old bruises, and the smell of every terrible shift you've ever survived. Nothing's easy, nothing's safe, but still, despite all this, despite the clunky gear, the hand-me-down tools, the constant threat of collapse or fire or random rats, somehow, people made it work. Tools got passed down from father to son. Tricks were shared in whispers between shifts. You learned where to swing, how to listen to the rock, how to know when it's about to break or when it's about to break you. There's a strange rhythm to it. Pick, pick, crack, hammer, chisel, echo, scoop, haul, side. It's exhausting, but familiar. Breathe deep, but not too deep. Air down there. You know what's underrated? Air. Just good, clean, regular air. The kind that doesn't smell like moldy firewood and feet. The kind that doesn't make your lungs feel like they've been rubbed with chalk and coal. But if you're a medieval miner, air isn't something you can take for granted. Down in the mine, breathing becomes a bit of a gamble, and it's not one you're likely to win. Let's talk about your lungs. They're not happy. Your average medieval mine doesn't have a ventilation system. No fans, no ducts, no little machines that hum softly in the background. You've got two options. Hope there's a natural breeze from another tunnel. There usually isn't. Count on someone topside to manually push air down through a pipe. And by pipe, we mean a sad leather tube that leaks. Meanwhile, you're swinging a pickaxe, stirring up dust, sweating like a boiled potato, and breathing it all in. Not ideal. The smells of a medieval mine. At all. Let's take a deep, careful sniff of your workplace. Damp stone, always. Everything is moist. Why? No one knows. It just is. Tallow smoke. That's from your candle. It's made from animal fat. Smells like regret, sulfur, ever cracked into a sulfur vein. It smells like someone boiled an egg in a swamp, then set it on fire. Stale sweat. From you, from your co-workers, from generations of ghosts who also worked here and never found the exit. Rotten wood. The support beams are old. Some are fungus adjacent, some are fungus. And beneath it all, the quiet panic of not quite getting enough oxygen. Candle check. Are you about to pass out? Miners had a trick. It wasn't scientific, but it was spooky effective. Watch your candle. If the flame burns steady, great. You're probably fine. If it flickers wildly, there's a draft. Could mean an air pocket, or just a rat sneezing nearby. If it dims or goes out, well, either you're about to discover a gas pocket, or there's no oxygen left in that tunnel. Time to back up slowly and start praying. Candles don't lie. Funguses that might kill you in your sleepy little tunnel. Let's meet some invisible friends. Black damp. That's a fun medieval term for low oxygen air. You won't see it, but you'll feel it. Dizzy, slow. Your brain says, hum. Then it says nothing at all. Fire damp, methane or other flammable gases. If it builds up, one stray spark can make your tunnel go boom. Stink damp. That's hydrogen sulfide. Smells like rotten eggs. Then stop smelling as your nose gives up. Then you give up permanently. The miners didn't know the science, but they knew the signs. Headaches, fainting, sudden nosebleeds. They knew when the air turned wrong. They just couldn't do much about it. Medieval ventilation systems there. Mostly hopes and prayers. Some minds tried to be clever. They built ventilation shafts, narrow vertical holes that led to the surface. The idea: hot air rises, cool air sinks, and maybe you'll get a breeze. Sometimes it worked. Mostly it did, and single quotes d. Other setups involved bellows, giant hand-pumped air blowers. If you're lucky, a teenage apprentice is working one topside, pumping air through a cowhide tube into your tunnel. If he gets bored, good luck. Fire and chimney draft. Light a fire at one end of the mine, let it suck air through. This worked until it burned the mine down. Tunnel layout tricks, like curving tunnels to catch breezes, which sounds cool until you realize you've just created a gas trap. In short, medieval air control was mostly vibes. You can't really escape it no matter how clever the setup. The truth is this: the longer you're down there, the worse the air gets. You're breathing out carbon dioxide. Your candle's eating up oxygen. The dust never settles, it just waits in the air for you to suck it in. Your lungs are blackened slowly over time. You cough, you wheeze, you blame it on the weather. But deep down, you know, it's the mind. It's always the mind. And yet, you add up strangely. Your body adjusts. You breathe shallower. You take breaks without realizing. You lean your head against cool stone and close your eyes. Just for a second, you learn to tell bad air from really bad air. You follow your candle's warning like it's your boss. You start whistling not out of joy, but because miners believed it kept evil spirits and gas pockets away. And if something whistles back, you leave. The air outside never smelled so good at the end of your shift. When you finally stumble out of the tunnel, eyes squinting, clothes black and dew, take a breath of fresh, cleanish medieval air. It's full of chimney smoke, manure and mud, but compared to the mine, it's glorious. You breathe deep. You cough a little, then you breathe again. The mine took a few more hours from your lungs. But for now, you're still standing and still breathing. Let there be light a little bit. Maybe so far, you've survived the dark, the damp, and the dangerous. You've hauled rocks. You've coughed up dust. You've whispered nervous prayers into tunnels that echo back like they're thinking it over. But today, let's talk about light, or more accurately, the lack of it. Because mining in the Middle Ages, it was basically hide and seek with rocks, and you were always losing. Total darkness, the default setting. When you walk into a mine shaft, the light disappears fast. There's no sunlight trickling in like in the movies. Once you're more than a few paces inside, it's pitch black, like I can't see my own hand. Black, like did I just blink, or did the world end? Black, and in that darkness, you've got one hope: fire. Tiny, flickering, weak little fire, tallow candles. Let's talk sad little flames. Your main source of light is a candle made from tallow, aka rendered animal fat. It smells exactly like you think it would, like something that used to moo and now regrets everything. It's short, it melts fast, it drips everywhere, and it gives off just enough light to make the darkness feel personal. The flame wiggles with every movement of air, and if it goes out, well, enjoy standing very still until someone comes to find you. Or doesn't. You stick the candle in a blob of clay or wedge it into a crack in the wall. Sometimes, you tie it to your helmet or what passes for one. Other times, you just hold it in your hand, swinging a pickaxe one-handed while praying the wax doesn't burn your knuckles. Oil lamps, slightly fancier. Still terrible if your mine is feeling fancy, or you work in a salt mine with more budget. You might use an oil lamp. Picture a little metal bowl with a spout and a cloth wick. You fill it with oil, usually fish oil or flaxseed oil, and light it up. The good news: it lasts longer than a candle. The bad news: it's heavier, leaks, and smells like fermented sea monster. Also, the flame is still tiny. Like, blink, and it's gone. Tiny. Problems with fire. Part 1. It's hot. No, this might sound obvious, but fire is hot. And when you're in a cramped, low-ceiling tunnel, holding an open flame near your face, it gets toasty. Fast. If you're carrying a candle close to your chest while working, you're basically slow roasting your own beard. Some miners singed off their eyebrows so often they just gave up and went for the smooth cave goblin look. And if a drop of wax hits your skin mid-swing, that scream echoes 4 hours. Problems with fire. Part 2. It's gassy down here. Here's the fun part. Some rocks, especially in coal or sulfur-rich mines, give off flammable gases. That's right. Invisible air pockets full of boom. So if your flame meets a pocket of fire damp, That's medieval 4.0 no. The tunnel's exploding. You get a mini fireball. Not great, especially when you're 300 feet underground with no quick exit. Miners learn to walk slowly with flames out front, arms stretched ahead like they were politely offering the fire to the darkness first. If it flared, back away, very fast, and hope for the best. Light strategy. The bare minimum a whole mine might operate with just a handful of lights. You bring your own candle. That's it. No overheads, no string lights, no cozy ambience. The mine owner didn't care about your comfort. Candles cost money. If they gave you one at all, it was reused, melted down, burnt halfway already. You learn to ration the flame. You light it only when you absolutely must, the rest of the time. You work in the dim glow from someone else's candle 2 tunnels over, squinting and pretending you can see what you're doing. Spoiler, you can't. Night and day don't matter anymore inside the mine. Time stops. You could be working at dawn, or dusk, or midnight. You wouldn't know. The candle doesn't care. It burns the same whether it's Monday or Thursday, whether there's a storm or a wedding or the king himself has declared a feast day. And when your candle burns low, there's no warning bell, no soft fade out. It just sputters and dies and leaves you in the dark. Superstitions. When the light flickers, so do humaners were deeply superstitious, and with good reason. They believed a candle that flickered too much was a warning of gas, of collapse, of something else. Sometimes, if a flame burned blue, they'd leave the tunnel entirely. Some said the mine had spirits, old souls who never made it out, ghosts who whispered through cracks in the wall, waiting to blow your candle out and see what you'd do in the dark. You laughed about it during lunch. But deep in the tunnel, when your candle flickers for no reason and the air goes still, you stop laughing. And maybe you light a second one, just in case. Medieval engineering. Hope this ladder holds. So you've made it through the dark. You've breathed the bad air. You've swung your terrible tools and squinted through the gloom. But now it's time to climb a little deeper into the mine, literally, because the shaft is too deep to just walk in anymore. And if you think you're getting a modern elevator with buttons and background music, oh, sweet sleeper, no, you're getting a ladder. A medieval ladder. And it is every bit as terrifying as it sounds. Welcome to Vertical Meninga's medieval. Mines got deeper. Getting in and out became a daily test of balance, strength, and questionable carpentry. You didn't stroll into these places. You climbed down, sometimes 30, 40, even 100 meters on a handmade wooden ladder that looked like it had been built by a sleep-deprived squirrel. There's no safety harness, no cage, no backup rope. It's just you, the wood, and gravity whispering, "Try me." How these ladders were made and why that's a problem. A medieval mining ladder was usually built right into the shaft. Picture to long wooden beams, if they could find one straight enough, with crossbars nailed or pegged in at uneven intervals. Sometimes they were made on the surface and lowered in place. Other times, they were built inside the shaft, one rung at a time, nailed into the wall by someone dangling on the last rung they built. Yes, that happened. Sometimes, miners just carved steps into the rock itself, like a primitive staircase. These were called footholes. They were slippery and narrow and not great. Let's just say, nothing screamed solid construction down here. The climb, don't look down or up, really climbing into the mine at the start of your shift was an experience. You went down holding a candle in your teeth, or tied to your cap, or held between your fingers while gripping the ladder with your other hand on one sad foot. The wood creaked, Your boots slipped, your palms sweated. If it was raining outside. The whole ladder turned into a vertical slip and slide of splinters and bad decisions. Some miners sang on the way down. Not for fun, just to drown out the sound of the ladder. Complaining, carrying tools while climbing. A medieval balancing act, of course. You weren't just climbing. You were also hauling stuff. A pickaxe, a chisel, maybe a hammer, a pouch of candles, and whatever sense of courage you had left. Sometimes, you tied tools to your belt and clanked your way down like a miserable wind chime. Other times, you carried them in your teeth. Yes, your teeth. That was a thing. If you dropped something, you had two options. Go back down and get it, declare it lost forever, and hope your boss never asks. You always chose option 2. The descent is bad, but the climb back up. Worse, after hours of digging and coughing and dragging carts, the climb out was the final insult. Your arms were jelly, your legs were shaking, you were covered in sweat, dust, and the quiet despair of someone who knows they have to do this again tomorrow. The ladder now seemed longer, crueler. Every rung felt like it might give. Every breath was heavier. Sometimes you paused halfway and just leaned your forehead against the wall, just for a second. Just to feel something cool and not moving. And you prayed, really prayed, that the guy above you didn't slip. Because if he did, it was like medieval miner dominoes, pulleys, baskets, and the myth of convenience eventually. Some mines did try to get clever. They installed hand-cranked pulleys to lift people or buckets up and down. A big wooden wheel, turned by a human or donkey, pulled a rope that raised a basket. It sounds fancy. It was not. The baskets were made of rough wood or woven reeds. They wobbled, they swayed. They had no sides, just enough shape to hold all or one person trying very hard not to scream. You'd sit in it, clutching the edges like a squirrel on a windmill, while someone above cranked and muttered something about your weight. And yes, it broke all the time. Rope snapped, wheels jammed. People fell. You know what they called that? Bad luck. The occasional shaft elevator. Don't get excited. Later in the medieval period, some mines got what could generously be called an elevator. It was a big vertical wheel that a human would walk inside like a hamster. As the wheel turned, it raised a platform. Yes, you read that right. You got in a box, and your co-worker walked in a wheel like a large, exhausted rat, slowly hoisting you skyward. If you tripped, you dropped. So most people still took the ladder. Falling, very common, very fatal. There were no helmets, no nets, no ropes tied to your waist. If you slipped, that was it. Some mines did have platforms built into the walls to break your fall. Unfortunately, they also broke a lot of other things like ribs, or legs, or the will to ever climb again. Still, miners kept climbing. Because what else could they do? They learned to listen to the creaks. They knew which rung wobbled. They learned to move fast, but not too fast. And they never, ever trusted a rope that looked new, because it probably wasn't. What are we even mining for? So, you've crawled into the pit. You've climbed down the ladder. You've scraped your hands, coughed up something strange, smashed your thumb with your own hammer, twice. But what are you actually doing all this for? Seriously? What's the point of all this rock breaking and lung damaging and candle burning? Let's talk about the real reason you're down here in the dark. Stuff. Treasure. Maybe. Precious metals. Sometimes. Salt. Yes, lots of salt. But mostly, you don't know. Because your lord, or your boss, or your boss's boss just told you, dig here. And so you dig. Silver. The fancy metal you'll never own. Let's start with the shiny stuff. Silver was one of the big prizes of medieval mining. It was used to make coins, religious objects, goblets for people way fancier than you, and sometimes armor for knights who never went near a battlefield. It was valuable. It was in high demand, and if your mine struck silver, your lord made money. The king got a cut, the church got a cut, you got bread, maybe. Silver mines were some of the most dangerous to deep, hot, unstable. But people kept digging, because there's always someone shouting, "There's more down there." And never someone shouting, "Maybe we should stop and think about this." Gold, extremely rare, but very motivational. Gold was less common than silver, a lot less, but the dream of gold that kept a lot of people swinging pickaxes in places they probably shouldn't have. Sometimes, medieval miners found tiny flakes of gold mixed into quartz or gravel, and by tiny, we mean you need a magnifying glass and a very good imagination. But the rumor of gold that spread like wildfire. Peasants talked, priests whispered, lords pointed to a hill and said, "Start digging, we're going to be rich." They weren't. Still, even a hint of gold was enough to keep people sweating underground for months. And if you did find it, it went straight to the crown, because medieval kings were very good at declaring, if you find gold, it's technically mine, and if you hide it, you're technically in prison. Salt, the white gold of the Middle Ages. Salt, the stuff on your fries. Salt wasn't just a seasoning back then. It was survival. It preserved meat. It cured fish. It kept food from rotting. In a time when refrigeration meant put it in the cold part of the river and hope. So salt mines were big business. They were also brutal. Salt dust filled your eyes, your nose, your lungs. The tunnels were narrow and rough. Everything stung. But salt made money. Tons of it. Kings taxed it. Lords hoarded it. Entire cities were built around it. You just hauled it, and then went home and ate turnips without salt, iron and lead. Heavy, useful. Iron was everywhere. Nails, tools, horseshoes, weapons, cooking pots. But mining iron ore wasn't glamorous. It was just heavy. Like, very heavy. Same for lead. Lead was used in roofing, pipes, stained glass windows, even medicine, which is alarming, considering it was poisoning people the entire time. Mining lead was toxic. Breathing it, bad idea. Touching it all day, worse. But hey, someone needed to hammer sheets of it into a bishop's bathtub. And that someone was you. Copper and tin. The bronze boys. Copper was used for coins, cookware, and art. Tin was mainly for making bronze, an alloy that was strong, durable, and, again, completely unavailable to you. These metals were usually mined in chunks called ore, which then had to be roasted, crushed, washed, and smelted. So, even when you finished mining it, your job was far from over. You dug it, carried it, piled it, watched it get carted away to someone else's fire, and you still didn't know what it was for. Sometimes, nothing. You just dug. Not every mine had a clear purpose. Sometimes, a lord would point to a hillside and say, "There's something valuable in there. Go find it." And that was it. No maps, no surveys, no idea what valuable even meant. So you and your friends would spend months digging a shaft into perfectly ordinary rock. And when nothing came out, well, the overseer would say, "At least now we know there's nothing there." And off you'd go to the next patch of dirt. And the cycle would begin again. Who decided where to dig? Usually someone who didn't have to do the digging. Mining decisions came from lords, church officials, wealthy landowners, or the occasional wandering expert who claimed to divine metal with a stick. a practice called dowsing, which was about as scientific as flipping a coin and blaming the devil. They'd say things like, "I feel the silver in my bones," or "This moss only grows near copper." You, of course, just nodded and started digging dots, because if you questioned the plan, you could be replaced by someone with slightly lower standards. So, what was it all for? For money, for power, for the dream of treasure. Not for you, of course. For your betters. But the strange thing is, people still did it. Because sometimes, if the mind did well enough, you might get a little raise, a little meat with your bread, a better candle, maybe a new tunic. Maybe. Mostly, though, you just kept digging. Not because you believed in silver or salt, but because this was your job. And in the Middle Ages, a job you could survive doing even barely was worth clinging to. The pay sucks, too. So you've been mining 4 weeks. You've lost a toenail. Your back sounds like a bag of dry twigs. You've swallowed enough dust to build your own hill. And finally, it's payday. Or is it? Well, kind of, sort of, not really. Welcome to medieval mining wages, where you work like a mule, but get paid like a goat. Wages, technically a thing. Let's start with the basics. Yes, medieval miners did get paid. Sometimes. Usually in coin, or food, or both. But the pay wasn't based on how hard you worked. It was based on how much you came out of the mine. So if the mine had a good week, you got a few extra pennies. If the mine had a bad week, you still worked the same exhausting hours. For less. Or nothing. Or worse, you owed them. Yes, you read that right. Sometimes, miners ended up in debt to the very people who hired them, because medieval capitalism was somehow both basic and brutal. Coin, bread, ale, depends on the lord. Payment was weird and wildly inconsistent. Some miners were lucky and got paid in silver coins. Others were paid in food, bread, beans, salted herring if you were very lucky. Sometimes you got ale, because hydration is important and beer doesn't spoil like water. And occasionally, your wages came in the form of permission to not be punished that week. Truly, a generous age. Work all day. Wait all week. You didn't get paid daily. Nope. Wages came weekly, monthly, or when the overseer felt like it. If the mine was far from town, the man carrying your wages might just not come back. Bandits, they'd say. Robbed, they'd shrug, and you'd nod slowly, with clenched teeth, and go back to work. Pay delays and convenient amnesia. Mining bosses in the Middle Ages had a magical skill, forgetting they owed you money. Double quote. So, I thought we paid you last week. No. Must be a mistake. Don't worry, I'll write it down. Spoiler, he never wrote it down. And if you complain too loudly, you might just be labeled difficult, or ungrateful, or missing. It was best to be quiet. Debt, the other side of the shovel. Some mines operated like medieval company towns. You lived in a cottage owned by the mine. You bought food from a shop owned by the mine. You borrowed tools rented from guess who the mine. And when payday came, they deducted the cost of all those things. So your handful of coins turned into 1 coin, then a half, then none. Better luck next week, the clerk would say, eating a sausage you could smell, but never afford. Want a raise? That's cute. Raises weren't really a thing. You might get a bonus if you discovered a new vein of silver, or if you were the last one still alive after a collapse, but mostly, pay stayed the same. 4 years. If you wanted more, you could try asking, but medieval lords were not known for generous hearts or open-door policies. Best case, they laughed. Worst case, you were replaced by someone younger, hungrier, and slightly less injured. The church gets a cut. 2. Did we mention the church? Yes. Even your tiny wages might be taxed by the local monastery, because according to canon law, a portion of all income, no matter how small, was owed to God. So after the Lord takes his cut, and the boss deducts your tool rental, and you pay for bread, and you owe the shop for a candle stub. Here comes Father Benedict, smiling gently, hand outstretched for his 1 copper coin. Blessings be upon you, he says, and you nod, wondering if blessings can be used as currency, miners' guilds, a little bit of hope in some places, like certain German towns, or later in England. Miners eventually formed guilds, a sort of early labor union. These groups set rules for fair wages, safety practices-ish, and sick leave kind of, but these guilds only existed in certain places, and usually only helped if you were local, male, and lucky. Otherwise, you were on your own. Side hustles were scarce. Thinking about a side job to make ends meet, well, there weren't many. Maybe hauling buckets, sharpening tools, selling mushrooms, begging. You couldn't freelance online. You couldn't drive a medieval Uber. You couldn't exactly Etsy your way out of debt. So unless your chickens started laying golden eggs, mining was it. And even the chickens were underfed. But why stay? Because the alternative was often worse. Sure, the pay sucked, but it was something. Farming was seasonal. Craft guilds were exclusive. The army was dangerous. And begging was illegal. Mining, for all its misery, was a job. And sometimes that was enough to keep people digging day after day, week after week, because a few coins were better than none. And a bowl of barley porridge beat an empty belly. Barely. Accidents. Totally normal. So, you've made it this far. You've been mining 4 months. Your arms are strong. Your lungs are iffy. Your back sounds like it's narrating a horror story. And yet you're still standing. That's impressive. Because let's be honest, medieval mines were not known for their safety records. In fact, if you asked a miner back then what the average lifespan was underground, he'd probably say, not long. Let's tuck ourselves in and talk about all the totally normal, completely expected disasters that happened in your friendly neighborhood medieval mine. 1. Cave-ins, a classic favorite tale. 20 meters underground, swinging your pickaxe into a vein of silver, when you hear a groan, not from your stomach. From the walls, the earth shifts, the timbers crack, and before you can say, maybe we should have reinforced this, the ceiling collapses. Just another Tuesday. Cave-ins were common, because medieval mines didn't have modern support systems. No steel beams, no load sensors, just wooden posts, hope, and prayers. And sometimes the wood was old, or damp, or missing entirely because someone needed firewood. So if the ground wanted to collapse on you, it usually did. 2. Falling rocks, the surprise bonk. Even if the ceiling didn't cave in all at once, little pieces of it were always falling off. A loose chunk of stone here, a bit of shale there, occasionally a whole boulder the size of your head. Medieval helmets, not standard issue. So a falling rock meant bruises, cuts, concussions, or worse. Some miners wore wool caps, others wore nothing. Your best protection was ducking fast and listening for that ominous little crack above you. 3. Getting lost, the underground maze problem. No one had a map. The tunnels twisted in strange directions. Some mines had multiple levels, stairs, trapdoors, shafts, ladders, and absolutely zero signage. Getting lost wasn't rare. Some poor soul would wander off to find the latrine and never come back. Sometimes they were found hours later, covered in soot and shame. Other times, not found at all. Mines were dark, echoey, and confusing, especially when your only light was a candle, and your candle went out. Hope you remembered which way you came from, or at least packed a snack. Point 4. Poison gases. The silent killers. Let's talk about gases. They don't smell good. They don't warn you. They just sit there, waiting. Gases like carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and sulfur dioxide seeped up from underground pockets or formed from burning torches in unventilated tunnels, and then you fainted or fell asleep or stopped breathing altogether. Miners didn't have gas detectors. Sometimes they brought a bird or a mouse down with them. If the bird keeled over, that was your sign to leave. If you keeled over first, well, too late. 5. Water. The creeping flood mines like to flood. If it rained too much, or if someone dug into a hidden underground spring, the whole tunnel could fill with cold, murky water in minutes. Wooden pumps existed, but they were slow and unreliable. Buckets were helpful until the water reached your chest. And remember, most miners couldn't swim. Why would they? Rivers were for washing sheep. So when the water came rising up, your only option was to run. If the tunnel sloped uphill, you had a chance. If it didn't, sleep tight. Soggy miner. 6. Fires. It gets worse. Mines are made of rocks and dirt, not flammable, right? But the wood supports, the oil-soaked rope, the dry dust in the air, and the occasional lantern left too close to a beam, all very flammable. Some mines even used a method called fire setting, lighting a fire against the rock wall to crack it apart with heat. Clever. Yes, dangerous. Also yes. Sometimes the fire got out of hand. Other times, the smoke alone was enough to make everyone panic. Either way, you ran for the exit with tears in your eyes and soot in your nose. 7. Falling down a shaft. Whoops, there were holes. Deep ones. Some were marked. Many were not. One wrong step in the dark, and down you went. 10 meters, 20 meters, maybe more. You hit a ledge, or the bottom, or someone else's head. If you were lucky, you broke a leg. If you weren't, well, let's not get graphic. You're trying to fall asleep. 8. Collapsing ladders, ropes, and platforms. Ropes snapped. Ladders splintered. Platforms wobbled like scared goats. Everything was made of wood, and that wood was not inspected by any sort of official. It was built fast, patched badly, and used daily, and you had to trust it with your life. So every time you climbed a ladder or crossed a rickety bridge, there was a little voice in your head whispering, "This might be it." Double quotes. Charming. 9. Tools. That fought back. Your pickaxe could rebound and hit your shin. Your hammer might glance off a stone and hit your face. Your chisel might slip and take part of your thumb with it. These weren't rare events. They were just accidents, or, as your boss called them, your problem. First aid consisted of spitting on the wound, wrapping it with someone's shirt, going back to work anyway. Hospitals were for the rich. You just had to be tough and hope it didn't get infected. 10. Rats, bats, and other tunnel fronts. Sometimes your shift was interrupted by a rat running across your foot, or a bat flying straight into your face. Both were harmless, technically. But in the dark, after 8 hours underground, your nerves were not ready. One miner reportedly fell into a shaft after flinching away from a spider. Mines were alive with tiny horrors. Mine bosses, lords, and people who don't care if you live. You've survived the shift. You've dodged falling rocks, choked on dust, and smacked your shin on a ladder rung. Your hands are blistered, your eyes sting, and your back is performing some kind of protest movement. You finally crawl out of the tunnel, blinking into the sun like a mole. You stretch, you sigh, you look up, and there he is. The mine boss, freshly washed, standing on the surface, wearing shoes that aren't muddy. Let's talk about the folks who ran medieval mines and how very little they cared about whether you lived through the week. The mine boss, not your friend first up, your direct superior. He's the overseer, or maybe the foreman, or just the guy who yells the loudest. He probably used to be a miner years ago, but now he manages you, which mostly means shouting dig faster, complaining about your productivity, occasionally taking a long break to drink something that smells like vinegar, and regret if you bring him a safety concern, like the roof is creaking or the ladder snapped again. His answer is usually, fix it yourself, or don't worry about it, or the classic, just don't stand under it. He's not paid to care. He's paid to get silver out of the mountain, and you're the tool he uses to do that. The clerk, a human ledger book somewhere nearby, sitting at a splintery desk with a tiny ink pot and a very annoyed goose feather, is the mine clerk. His job is to write down how much all comes out of the mine, who worked which shifts, who gets paid how much spoiler. Not much. He's also the one who decides if you owe the mine money for equipment or meals or accidental damages. He's not exactly evil, just made entirely of paper, rules, and sighing noises. If you ask why your pay was docked, he'll shrug and point at a number he just made up. It's hard to argue with a man who controls your entire financial life, using a dull quill and a vague frown. The noble who owns everything. No, we're going up the food chain. Above your boss and above the clerk is the local noble, the lord, the baron, the guy with the sword and the very nice curtains. He probably doesn't know your name. He probably doesn't care that you even have a name. What he does care about is silver, or copper, or salt, or whatever else the mine spits out, because he gets a cut. Sometimes he owns the mine, sometimes he just taxes it. Either way, every lump of ore you dig helps him buy another feather pillow. Does he visit the mine? Maybe once, for a photo op if cameras existed. Otherwise, he's far away in his warm manor house, sipping wine and trying to remember if you're the guy with the limp or the guy with the beard. You're both. The church. Yep. They get a slice too. Did you think the church would miss out? Even holy men need to fund their projects like fixing roofs, building cathedrals, or painting that one wall again because Brother Thomas spilled wax on it. Many mines paid a tithe, a tenth of everything, to the local monastery or parish. It was for the good of your soul, they said. Even if you were coughing up black dust and couldn't feel your toes, giving money to the church meant you were spiritually rich, which was comforting. Maybe you still had to sleep on straw, but at least your ghost might get into heaven. Merchants, the middlemen with soft hands. The ore is hauled out. It doesn't stay in your pocket. It goes to merchants. They weigh it, they smelt it, they resell it, and guess what? They take a cut too. These guys usually wore nice coats and smelled less like sweat and more like cloves, which is to say they had never been in a mine, but they made more profit off your labor than you ever would. Some of them even acted like they were doing you a favor by bringing trade to the region, and maybe they were. You just didn't see much of the reward, unless you count the new tax the town added last winter. So who actually cared about you? Well, sometimes other miners cared. You looked out for each other. You shared a crust of bread, or warned someone not to stand under that creaky beam. Sometimes your family cared, if you had one, but the system, the bosses, the people in charge, they cared that the mine worked, not that you did. If someone got injured, There was no paid time off. You were either back on your feet in 2 days or replaced if someone died. There was a short silence, and then someone else took the pickle. Why did anyone do it? Then, good question. People mind because they had no other option. You could be a poor farmer with bad soil, a runaway serf looking for work, a villager hit by a bad harvest and desperate for income. Mining was dangerous, exhausting, often deadly, but it paid something. And in medieval life, something was often the best you could get. Living above ground still kinda sucked. So, you've made it out of the mine alive. Good for you. You've survived falling rocks, bossy bosses, bad air, and that one guy who keeps coughing directly on your lunch. You deserve a reward, a rest, warm, dry bed, and a meal that doesn't smell like pickaxe grease. Unfortunately, you're going home to your medieval miner's house, and I hope you like discomfort, because things up here still suck. Your house, a sad, damp boxlit set. The scene, your house is made of wood, maybe some wattle and daub, and wishful thinking. The walls are cracked, the roof leaks. There's a funny smell in the corner, and nobody wants to talk about it. It has one room, and that one room does everything: cooking, eating, sleeping, sneezing, panicking. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof to let the smoke out, which mostly lets rain in. The floor, packed earth, sometimes with straw, sometimes without. It squishes a little when it rains. Try not to think about why. The furniture situation, minimalist unintentionally. Don't have a couch, you don't have a mattress. You do have a wooden bench, wobbly, a table also wobbly, a bed frame, maybe, or a pile of sacks stuffed with straw, a bucket, which does bucket thinks of everything, smells vaguely like wet dog, even if you don't own one. Heating and light, low and smoke if you want warmth. You light a fire in the center of the room. It smokes, it sputters, it makes the air taste like burnt toast and regret. At night, you might burn a tallow candle, basically a waxy lump made from animal fat. It smells awful, it drips, it doesn't help you see much. But hey, it's cozy in a medieval kind of way. Just try not to knock it over, because your house is very, very flammable. What's that smell? Ah yes, we should talk about the smell. There's no plumbing. There's no garbage pickup. There's no air freshener. Your toilet is a wooden chamber pot under the bed. Or maybe a ditch outside. Or just wherever's convenient when it's cold. People wash themselves rarely, and clothes. You wear them until they stop being clothes and start being rags with hopes and dreams. The air is filled with the warm, familiar bouquet of smoke, sweat, damp, wool, old onions. Regret your nose gets used to it. Eventually. Meals at home, beige and boiled in a time. Let's see what's on the menu. Bread, stale gruel, thin turnips again, possibly some dried peas if it's a fancy night. If you're lucky, you might get a little salt pork or a boiled egg. If you're really lucky, the bread doesn't have a rock baked into it this time. Seasoning, spices, flavor, nope. Your taste buds gave up around the same time your spine did. Family time, aka everyone's tired. You don't live alone. You live with your partner, who's equally tired, several children, at least one of whom is sticky, maybe your parents. If they're still alive, possibly a neighbor or boarder, because space is tight and rent is imaginary at night. You all curl up together on the floor, or maybe in one big bed. It's like a medieval sleepover, but no one's having fun. People snore, someone coughs, a child kicks you in the face, but at least you're not underground. Chores, the fun never ends. Even after a full day of mining, there's still work to do. You chop wood, you haul water, You patch leaks, scrape mud, and shoe goats. Your partner might be grinding grain, tending a garden, or fixing that one shirt that's more whole than cloth. No one gets a break. The work never stops. Sleep is something you borrow, not something you own. Neighbors, loud, close, and nosy. You can hear your neighbors through the wall, mostly because the wall is made of twigs and gilt. Sometimes they fight, sometimes they sing, sometimes they argue about whose pig wandered into whose garden. You try not to get involved, but you're also kind of invested in the drama now. Sickness. Get in line. Remember the mind dust in your lungs. It followed you home. Now you're coughing. At night, your joints ache. Someone has lice again. If someone gets really sick, there's no doctor, just herbal remedies, prayers, and that one neighbor who swears by garlic and shouting. The closest thing to healthcare is rest, and you don't get much of that. Celebrations. Occasionally, yes, a very once in a while, there's a festival. You wear your least dirty tunic. You drink something fermented. You maybe dance awkwardly. And for one shining afternoon, you don't think about the mine or the roof or the fact that your feet haven't been dry since October. But tomorrow, it's back to the tunnel. So, yes, it still sucked. The point is, medieval life didn't get easier once you left the mine. It just changed flavors of discomfort. Above ground, you were cold, hungry, crowded, loud, and washed, and somehow still very, very tired. And yet, people survived, raised families, told stories, laughed, occasionally, because that's what humans do. Even when everything is mud and disappointment, strange beliefs and mind superstitions. Down in the dark, your mind plays tricks on you. You hear a rock shift and you freeze. You hear a whisper but no one's there. You feel a cold breeze and suddenly the hair on your neck stands up, even though it's already freezing. Working in medieval mines wasn't just physically hard, it was spiritually hard to because in those deep, echoing tunnels, people believed they weren't alone. Enter the mine spirits. Miners had a lot of superstitions. And honestly, you would too if you spent your days in a giant underground cave with bad air, flickering candles, and co-workers who believed shadows had names. Let's meet some of the strange company you might keep below the earth. 1. Knockers. They're helpful spirits. Let's start with the knockers. These were little mine spirits, kind of like gnomes, but grumpier. They got their name from the knocking sounds they made, tapping, rapping, banging, from deep inside the rock. Some miners believed that if you heard the knocking, the knockers were trying to warn you about danger, like a tunnel collapse or bad air. Others thought the knockers were trying to steal your lunch, or maybe just your soul. It really depended on the day. Best not to offend them. Point 2. Don't whistle, ever. A very important rule. Never whistle in a mine. Why? Well, whistling was said to attract evil spirits, or bad luck, or sometimes angry goblins with bad attitudes and worse fashion sense. In some regions, a whistle meant death was coming, or that the knockers would get jealous and collapse the ceiling just to shut you up. Either way, keep your lips closed and hum quietly at your own risk. 3. Bread and salt. Protective snacks. Bear descending into the mine. Some miners would tuck a piece of bread into their pocket, or a pinch of salt. This wasn't for lunch. This was protection. Bread symbolized life. Salt warded off evil. And together, they made a weirdly crunchy charm to keep the spirits at bay. If your candle went out for no reason, you might even toss a few crumbs onto the floor to calm the ghost. Snack diplomacy. 4. Bad omens. Don't bring that cat. Certain things were believed to bring horrible luck into a mine. These included women, old-timey sexism in action, priests, to holy, to ominous. No one was sure. Cats, spirits might follow them in. Green clothing. Yes, seriously, especially on a Monday. If someone showed up wearing green with a cat under one arm and a Bible in the other, you might as well call it a day. 5. Singing to the Menethys, one's gentler. Some miners believed the mine had a spirit, a presence, not necessarily bad, but powerful. So they'd sing softly before entering. Just a quiet tune, like a lullaby, to show respect, to ask permission. Like knocking before you enter someone's home. 6. The dead stay below. If a miner died underground, and many did, there was a superstition that they should never be brought out the same way they came in. You had to find another route, even if it meant digging a separate exit. Otherwise, the dead man's ghost might follow the same path and linger. People didn't like lingering ghosts, especially the kinds that know where you hide your salted bread. 7. Glowing lights. Flickering warning scandal flames were not just foreseeing, they were omens. If the flame flickered violently, bad air or a ghost. If the flame turned blue, a spirit was near. If the flame went out suddenly, something didn't want you there. Miners would stop, stare, and wait in complete silence. Sometimes they'd light another candle. Sometimes they'd pray. Sometimes they'd just go home and say, nope. 8. Leaving a coin for the spirits. In some regions, miners would leave a small coin near a tunnel opening, just tucked into the rock or dropped into a crack. It was an offering, a bribe. A little please don't murder me today, give to the spirits of the earth. If the coin disappeared, good, the spirit accepted. If it was still there tomorrow. 9. Dream warnings. A miner might dream of a collapse, or a flood, or something strange, like a giant rat made of shadows whispering the word Tuesday. That dream would be taken seriously. People might stay home, refuse to enter a certain shaft, wait for the spirits to calm down. Better to be safe than crushed under 6 tons of haunted gravel. 10. The mine as a living thing. At the core of all these beliefs was one big idea. The mine was alive. It had moods. It had secrets. It could get angry or generous. It could let you pass or trap you forever. You didn't just work in a mine. You lived in a relationship with it. A dark, creaky, slightly murderous relationship. So, was any of it real? Well, from a modern point of view, probably not. Knockers were likely just echoes and shifting stone. The flickering candles, air drafts, the whispers. Your own breath. But for a medieval miner, superstition was survival. When science fails, fear fills the gaps. If you're swinging a pickaxe 600 feet below the earth with no helmet, no plan, and no help, you might talk to the walls too. Women in mining, the forgotten laborers. When we picture medieval miners, we usually imagine sweaty, scruffy men with pickaxes, covered in grime, wheezing in a dark tunnel, which, fair enough. That's not wrong, but it's also not the whole story. Because outside the mine shaft and, sometimes even inside it, there were women. Working, lifting, hauling, sorting, sweating, doing jobs that rarely got recorded and rarely got recognized. Tonight, we talk about them. Women in the shadows. Literally, history didn't write down their names. No statues, no portraits, no songs about Gertrude the Sorter. But women were there. They worked in and around mines all across medieval Europe, especially in mining towns like Kutna-Hora in Bohemia or Freiburg in Saxony. And their jobs, not glamorous, not easy, but absolutely essential. The washing floors, wet, cold, and miserable at start above ground, once the ore was dragged out of the mine, heavy, dirty, and disappointing. It had to be processed, broken up, washed, sorted. That's where women came in. They stood outside on the washing floors, where crushed rock and mud were separated by hand and water. It was wet work, cold work. It often meant standing barefoot in shallow troughs, scrubbing rocks in icy water for hours. No gloves, no shoes. No fun. But without them, that shiny little nugget of silver wouldn't make it to the Lord's pocket. Or sorting, a fancy way of saying picking through rocks, another common job. Sorting, literally sitting for hours, picking through broken chunks of stone, trying to find the good bits. The ore that had value was often mixed with a lot of junk. Women used sharp eyes and sometimes sharper sticks to separate the useful from the useless. It was boring, repetitive, but it needed patience and precision. Two things they had in spades. Transport duty, because who else is gonna do it? Need buckets of ore hauled up a hill, water carried from the stream. Would fetch it for the smelting furnace. Guess who's on call? Yep, women again. They did a lot of manual transport work, often alongside children. Sometimes dragging sacks or pushing wheelbarrows that weighed almost as much as they did. There were no breaks, no weekends. No one called them strong, independent women. They were just doing what had to be done, quietly, tirelessly, invisibly, inside the mines. Sometimes, yes. In many places, women weren't officially allowed inside the mine shafts, but rules, like wooden ladders, can be flexible. There are scattered records fragments, really, that suggest women sometimes worked inside the mines, usually in the more stable, wider parts. They might carry tools, haul, even help with ventilation or water removal. It wasn't common, but it happened, especially when money was tight and families needed every able body to contribute, even the smaller, more breakable ones, pregnant and still working. Absolutely. Maternity leave. Medieval women laughed at the idea, quietly, while coughing. There are references to women working in ore processing areas while heavily pregnant. Sometimes right up until childbirth. Sometimes even returning to work within days. They weren't praised for this. There were no medals. It was just expected. If you don't work, you don't eat. And medieval babies didn't come with diaper services, health hazards. All of them. Working around mines came with a buffet of health problems, especially for women. They inhaled metal dust, touched toxic chemicals used in ore separation, carried heavy loads that damaged joints and spines. They worked long hours in cold conditions with wet feet, which led to chronic illness. And they still had to go home, tend the fire, feed the kids, patch the clothes, and maybe birth a child or two before sundown. Multitasking was not optional. The pay, practically non-existent. Most of these women weren't on any payroll. Their labor was considered part of a household contribution. If they were married, their wages were paid to their husbands. If they were single, they were often paid in food, firewood, or nothing. The phrase working woman existed, but the phrase fair pay did not. The children join in, and yes, children were part of the mining life too. Girls helped their mothers on the washing floors, sorted small pieces of ore, carried water, collected fuel, and absorbed all the same hazards. By the time they were teenagers, many were already full-time workers, just unofficial ones. Their names are missing from the records too, but they were there, covered in mud, picking rocks, getting older before their time. Why history forgot theme. So why don't we hear more about these women? Because medieval records focused on property, taxpayers, men with titles. Most women, especially poor, working class ones, didn't qualify. They didn't write journals. They didn't commission paintings. They didn't make laws or inherit land, but they kept towns running, they kept all moving. They kept mining alive. They were, in a quiet, exhausted way, just as much miners as the men underground. When the mine runs dry, now what? Let's say you've made it through the mining season. You've swung the pickaxe. You've ducked under rickety beams. You've inhaled more dust than fresh air. And by some miracle, you're still alive. Your back hurts. Your lungs wheeze. But you're used to it by now. Then one morning, you show up to work, and there's nothing. No new vein. No shine in the stone. No echo of metal. The mine is dry. And now it gets really bad. The party's over. And there was never a party. Medieval mining was always a gamble. Every tunnel was a bet. Every load of rock was a hope in disguise. Sometimes you hit a good vein. The silver sparkled, the copper glowed, the salt flowed, but just as often, the mine stopped giving, the rocks became dull, the wagons came up empty, and the Lord stopped smiling. No one throws a retirement party for a played-out mine. They just quietly close the shaft. And that's that. Laid off. Medieval style workers get layoffs. Medieval miners just got told nothing left. Go home, no severance, no paperwork, sometimes not even their last wages. If your job disappeared, so did your income, and your bread, and maybe your roof, because miners didn't usually own land. They didn't have savings, and they certainly didn't have LinkedIn. Ghost town, population, humaning towns were like mushrooms. They popped up fast when ore was found, and shriveled just as fast when it was gone. Shops closed. Markets dried up. Even the church might pack up and move. Your noisy, muddy little village. Now just quiet and sad. The forge goes cold. The carts stop rolling. You start to hear the wind again. And it sounds a little like hunger, trying to find another mineo could try to move, of course, another town, another hole in the ground, another chance to gamble your health and limbs, but it's risky. The next mine might be even worse. It might already be full of desperate workers, and traveling isn't free. You still need food, clothes, maybe a mule, maybe shoes. If you had anything worth selling, it's probably gone already. So you sit and wait and hope another vein turns up nearby. Spoiler, it probably won't. Back to the fields if they'll have you. Maybe you try farming. The land doesn't dry up, right? But there's a catch. You don't own land, and the Lord might not want you back. You've been gone too long. Your hands know rock better than wheat, and those calluses, not very helpful for handling plows. You might get work as a field hand, paid in food, maybe, treated like a stranger, definitely, but it's work, and it's outside, which, honestly, is a nice change. Other jobs that are also terrible if farming doesn't work out. You might try wagon driver, except your back is ruined. Woodcutter, but your hands shake. Gravedigger, steady business. At least soldier, because nothing says career change like dying for someone else. None of these are glamorous. None of them pay well, but they beat starving. Probably. The debt never left. Did we mention the debt? Because while the mine may have dried up, the loans you took to survive didn't. You might still owe the smelter, the blacksmith, the lord, or worse, you pawned your tools and now can't afford to get them back. Some miners sold their clothes, their blankets, even their children's shoes. And debt collectors in the Middle Ages. Let's just say they weren't subtle, abandoned mines, dangerous and weirdly tempting cemeteries. The desperate went back. To the abandoned shafts, the unstable tunnels, the pits marked do not enter. Maybe there's still a bit of silver. They think Maybe just one more chunk of ore. These places were unsafe, collapsed, poisonous, cursed, according to some. But hunger makes you brave. Or foolish. Or both. And every once in a while, someone came back with something shiny. But more often, they didn't come back at all. From miners to poachers, thieves, and vagabondation, all else failed. People turned to whatever they could. That sometimes meant stealing. From forests, from farms, from people slightly less poor than you, hunting without permission, cutting down forbidden trees, taking bread that didn't belong to you. You might be caught, whipped, fined, jailed. But what else could you do? Starve, quietly. Some did, but not everyone went peacefully. A slow fade into nothing. No one writes songs about miners who outlive their mines. They just disappear from the records. Their village vanishes from maps. Their names fade from the church rolls. Their bones rest under trees where a forge once stood. Some moved. Some stayed and starved. Some died young, coughing and forgotten. The mine dried up. And so did their lives. Quietly, unfairly, completely. Moment of gratitude or so tonight, as you curl under your warm blanket in a home that isn't made of mud and smoke. Spare a thought for the miner who outlived the ore, who had no gold watch, no pension, no applause. Just empty hands and a long walk to nowhere. You don't have to feel guilty. Just feel grateful that you were born after the pickaxe was replaced by a coffee break. And after layoff didn't mean go starve in the woods. You made it, but at what cost? Congratulations, you did it. You survived medieval mining. You breathed in the dust. You ducked under beams that didn't want to hold. You chipped away at rock for years. Maybe decades. And somehow, you're still here. That's impressive. But let's check in. How are you feeling? Back crooked, lungs whistling like a kettle. Can't remember the last time you slept through the night without coughing. Yeah, sounds about right. You made it out. But let's not pretend you made it out clean. So, what do you have to show for it? Let's open your miner's ledger. Years of labor, days without food, broken tools, a handful of coins that barely pay for bread. You don't own land, you don't own a house, your boots have holes, but you do have something very valuable, experience, not the kind that gets you hired, just the kind that means you know exactly how to avoid a collapsing tunnel, where to place a support beam, and how to chew stale bread without cracking a tooth. So, that's something. Retirement. Never heard of it. Let's be real. Medieval miners didn't retire. They just slowed down and then stopped. Maybe you become the old guy who sharpens tools, or the one who tells spooky mine stories to the kids, even though you know they're all true. Or maybe you just sit on a rock outside the shaft entrance, watching, wheezing, waiting, because stopping completely, that doesn't really happen. Even when your hands are too shaky for a pickaxe, someone will find something for you to carry, or sweep, or suffer through your body. A collection of creaks and cracks. Let's do a quick scan. Your knees gone, your back bent like a shepherd's crook, your fingers curled into strange shapes from years of gripping tools, your lungs full of things they probably shouldn't be full of. Your hearing faint, your eyesight better in the dark than in daylight, oddly enough, and your skin calloused, burned, weathered like old leather. You're a walking geology sample. The next generation steps in. Maybe you have a son or a daughter. Maybe they're old enough now to swing their own pickaxe, or at least haul rocks to the surface. You try to stop them. You say, it's too hard. It's not worth it. But they just laugh. Because what else is there? no school, no guild to join, no path, but the one that leads underground. You wanted better for them, but all you have to offer is the same mine that nearly chewed you up. The mine remembers, yo I know every twist and turn, every creak in the beam overhead, every chillin', the corner that never warms, every place where a friend once stood and now doesn't. You've seen things, heard things, cave dash-ins, whispers, a lantern that flickered on its own, once, maybe twice. There's a part of you still down there, in the dark. It knows your name, it shaped your hands, it lives in your bones. And when you're gone, it'll still be there. Waiting for someone new. Above ground, life still isn't easy. Don't think the world above is much better. Your house is drafty, your neighbors are loud, the bread's always hard, and someone stole your chicken again. The tax man came, the priest said to pray more, and your wife says you smell like sulfur. She's not wrong, but you're still alive, still eating, still waking up each morning with at least one working leg. And in the Middle Ages, that's basically luxury. You were never in a painting, no one painted you. No one wrote a song or carved your name into a stained glass window. You didn't lead armies, you didn't invent anything, you didn't make it into the chronicles. You were a miner, and miners weren't heroes. They were just necessary, quietly, dangerously, heartbreakingly necessary. But you mattered. You pulled silver out of stone, you brought salt from the deep to the kitchens of kings. You helped build cathedrals, castles, coinage. You made the world run, and no one will remember you. But that's okay, because you were never in it for the glory. You were just trying to survive, feed your family, make it to the next season. And somehow you did. A final breath, and then some. So now, let yourself rest. Lay down your tools, stretch those sore legs. Let the ache in your back sink into the straw mattress. You've earned it. Let the world move on without you for a while. The mine will still be there tomorrow. Maybe someone else will pick up your hammer. Maybe they'll curse it the way you did. Maybe they'll find something shiny. Or maybe it'll just be rock. Either way, you won't be there to see it. You'll be sleeping, just like now.